The galaxy spoke about the alien matriarch in quiet voices. Traders spoke about her in spaceports. Admirals planned operations around her shadow. Scholars wrote long papers about her. No one could prove she was real, and yet everyone acted as if she might be. Some said she had stopped 2 wars by speaking a single sentence. Some said she had lifted a dying moon back to life. Some said she had vanished because she was tired of being used. These stories were fog and rumor, but they made people move ships and spend fortunes. They made people brave and cruel. They made people want to own what could not be owned. Captain Daniel Ross did not like rumors, but he could not ignore this one. He sat in the command chair of the starship Horizon and watched the stars drift by like slow sparks. He was steady, careful, and tired from long patrols. He liked clear orders and clean results. This mission was neither. He had been told to find the matriarch. He had not been told what to do after he found her. He knew that was not an accident. If he found her, powerful people would step in and tell him what they wanted. He did not like that idea either. Lieutenant Grace Miller stood at the sensor station. She had quick hands and focused eyes. She trusted numbers more than words. A few weeks ago, she had found a strange signal that did not match any normal engine, beacon, or storm. It pulsed like a quiet heartbeat. It came and went as if it wanted to hide and yet could not help being seen. Grace tracked it across 6 sectors. Every time it faded, she found it again. It felt like a trail left by someone careful but tired. She did not say that out loud. She did not want to sound like she was telling a story. Engineer Lucas Grant walked the narrow corridors with a small tool case. He cared for the ship the way other people cared for pets or gardens. He knew every sound the hull should make when it cooled after a jump. He knew which relay needed a gentle touch. He could tell if the reactor was unhappy just by the hum beneath his feet. He did not like missions where the crew was tense because tense people broke things. They pushed too hard. They kicked panels. They made the ship feel like it was being blamed for human fear. Lucas spoke to the Horizon in a calm voice as he ran his checks. He said they were going somewhere interesting. He said they would keep each other safe. The crew was small. They had worked together for 2 years, long enough to learn each other's habits and hopes. They joked when they could and fell quiet when they had to. They knew the mission had weight. They had seen a list of ships that had tried before them. Some had never returned. Some had returned with stories that did not agree with each other. One captain had said he heard a choir with no source. Another said he saw a single light that kept the darkness away. Another said he dreamed he was a child and woke with tears on his face. Their logs were flagged as incomplete but had not been erased. It was as if command wanted to remember that people felt strange things out there. Grace leaned toward her screen. The quiet heartbeat signal appeared again. It was stronger now. It came from a small system that did not appear on most maps. The star was old and soft. 2 small planets circled close, and a third planet sat farther out like a patient listener. Grace raised her voice. She said the signal was there. She said it fit the pattern exactly. Daniel did not ask for the probability. He had learned that Grace only used that tone when she was sure. Daniel told Helm to set a course. The navigator's hands moved over the controls and the Horizon folded space. The jump was smooth. When they dropped back into normal space, the forward view filled with the old star. It was orange and calm. Dust drifted in a wide band. The 3 planets were small and pale. There were no beacons. There were no heavy scans from military platforms. There were no patrol routes. It felt like a place that had been forgotten on purpose. Grace began a slow sweep. The ship moved like a quiet bird, careful not to disturb the dust band. Lucas throttled the reactor down so the signature would be small. He dimmed non-essential lights and told the ship to be quiet. The ship seemed to understand. The hum softened. They found it on the 3rd planet. It sat in a wide valley that curved like a smile. Mountains rose on both sides. A river ran through the middle and braided into small streams. A cluster of trees gathered near a low house. Smoke rose in a thin line. The signal came from that place like warmth from a hand. It was not a distress call. It was not a warning. It felt like a life. Daniel stared at the image and could not speak for a moment. He had expected a fortress or a hidden base. He had expected a storm of defense drones. He had expected the tension of a trap. Instead, he saw a small roof and a garden. Grace whispered that the readings were clean. No weapons platforms, no shield grid, no active orbit watch. The only power source was small, steady, and well-tuned. It kept the house warm and the water pure. It charged tools and kept lights soft at night. Lucas said he could build a unit like that in a day if he had the parts. Grace smiled and said she would hold the light while he worked. Their voices stayed low, as if the valley could hear them. Daniel felt the pressure of duty. He sent a message to the crew. He said they would go down in a small team. He said they would move with respect. He said they would not point a weapon unless a weapon was pointed at them. He said they would not record faces without consent. He closed the message and exhaled. They prepared a shuttle. Lucas checked the engines twice. Grace strapped in and ran a last scan. Daniel sat in the pilot seat because he wanted to feel the approach with his own hands. The shuttle separated from the horizon and slipped through the thin clouds. The valley opened under them with late afternoon light. The river flashed like a long mirror. The roof of the house held old rain marks that had dried in the shape of leaves. The garden rows were neat. A windmill turned slowly. Daniel set the shuttle down a short walk from the house. They stepped onto soft ground. The air was warm and smelled like wet soil and smoke. There was a bird call none of them knew. There was the low sound of water over smooth stones. They stood there for a moment and let their hearts slow. Then they walked the stone path. The door opened before they reached it. A man stood in the doorway. He was in his late 40s with sun-touched skin and lines beside his eyes. His hair was dark with some gray at the edges. He wore simple clothes and stood with a calm stance. He looked at them as if strangers at his door were not rare, and yet were always important. He said hello in a steady voice. He asked if they were hungry. He asked if they needed water. He did not ask who they were. Daniel said his name. Grace said hers. Lucas did too. The man nodded and said his name was Samuel Carter. Samuel stepped aside and invited them in. The house was simple and clean. There were hand-built shelves with books, tools, and small carved shapes. The kitchen smelled like fresh bread. A table by the window held a bowl of fruit from the valley trees. On the far wall hung a woven cloth with soft colors that changed with the light. It made the room feel like morning and evening at the same time. She entered from the back room without hurry. Her presence changed the air in a way none of them could explain. She was tall and graceful. Her skin held a soft silver tone that seemed to catch light rather than reflect it. Her eyes were amber like deep tea in sunlight. She wore clothing that was simple but made with care, the fabric falling like water over stone. When she looked at them, Daniel felt a memory rise that was not his. He felt a child let go of fear in a dark room. He felt a storm pass and leave clean air. He did not understand how a look could do that. Samuel spoke her name in a language they did not know. She nodded and then spoke in clear words they could understand. She welcomed them. She thanked them for coming with calm steps. She said this house was a place of rest. She asked if they would accept tea. Her voice was warm and low, and each word seemed chosen with care. Daniel found himself relaxing even as part of him stayed alert. He had been trained to watch for unseen moves. He could not see any. He could only see a life. They sat at the table. Samuel poured tea from a simple clay pot. The steam rose in a thin spiral. Grace wrapped her hands around the cup and felt heat soak into her fingers. Lucas looked at the woven cloth and asked about the pattern. Samuel said the pattern was called River Under Stars. He said the valley used to be colder. He said the cloth kept memory of that. Daniel finally asked the question that had followed them across space. He asked why the Matriarch, if she was the Matriarch, was here. He asked why there were no guards or walls. He asked why the signal pulsed when it did and faded when it did. He tried to make his voice even and respectful. He did not want to sound like a man delivering orders inside someone else's home. She listened without offense. She set her cup down and folded her hands. She said there are times when a voice used to command must go quiet, so it does not forget how to be a voice. She said there are times when a hand that used to hold power must learn to hold a cup and a seed. She said she had walked halls where every step changed a world. She said she had listened to people who loved power more than life. She said she had helped them anyway because that was her duty. She said one day she was very tired. She said one day she met a man who looked at her and did not see a symbol. He only saw a person who was cold and hungry and lost. She said she came here and then she never left. Samuel did not explain or look proud. The morning came with a soft glow over the valley. Mist rose from the river, drifting slowly across the garden and the fields. Captain Daniel Ross stood outside the small house watching the mist fade. He felt the weight of his orders like a stone in his chest. He had found the Matriarch. His mission was complete. But nothing about this felt finished. Nothing felt simple. Inside the house, Samuel prepared breakfast with calm hands. He sliced bread, stirred porridge, and poured water into clay cups. He hummed softly to himself a tune from no charter station. Grace Miller sat at the table, her fingers around a warm cup. She looked at the silver-skinned woman sitting across from her. The matriarch's amber eyes caught the morning light and seemed to carry both peace and sorrow. Grace wanted to ask 100 questions, but the words caught in her throat. She felt that speaking too quickly would break the calm around them. Lucas Grant crouched near the door, checking a portable scanner. He could not help it. He needed to understand what kept this place hidden. The scanner showed no heavy shielding, no cloaking grid, no complex technology. Yet the valley was invisible to passing ships. He shook his head. It's like the world itself wants to hide her, he muttered under his breath. The matriarch turned her head slightly as if she had heard him. She smiled gently. It is not the world hiding me, she said. It is my choice. When one chooses silence, even the stars forget to listen. Lucas looked down at his scanner and said no more. Daniel finally stepped inside. He sat at the table, his shoulders tense. You know why we are here, he said. You know the galaxy will not stop searching. Command will send others, stronger ships, people with less patience. The matriarch lifted her cup. Yes, they will keep coming. That is the way of those who believe power is more valuable than peace. She set the cup down, and yet I remain here. Samuel placed the bread on the table and looked at Daniel with calm blue eyes. You have a choice too, Captain. You can carry this secret back with you, or you can protect it. What you decide will matter, Grace frowned. But if we do nothing, others will find this place. We already did. That means the signal, or whatever it is, will draw them here again. The matriarch leaned forward. You are right. Others will come. That is why I must ask something of you. Daniel tensed. What is it you want from us? I want you to understand, she said softly. Not to take me back. Not to make me into a weapon or a prize. I want you to see that there is another way to live. The room fell quiet. The only sound was the crackle of the small stove and the river's faint murmur outside. Later that day, Samuel led them on a walk through the valley. He showed them how the streams watered the garden, how the soil was rich, and how the trees bent to protect the house from harsh winds. The crew listened, uneasy but curious. Samuel was not a warrior, not a leader, not a scholar, yet he spoke with quiet authority. He spoke as someone who had chosen his life with open eyes. As they walked, Grace asked him, Why did she choose you? Samuel chuckled. I didn't ask. I was just here. A broken ship. A man with no plan. She found me. Or maybe I found her. Either way we stayed, Grace pressed. But don't you feel afraid, knowing who she is? Knowing people will kill to control her? Samuel paused, looked at the mountains, and said, I feel afraid sometimes. But I also feel alive. I used to think survival meant running from one place to another, always chasing safety. Now I know survival is not enough. You need a reason to live. She gave me one. They returned to the house as the suns began to sink. Daniel walked behind them, silent. He felt torn between his duty and what he saw before him. The matriarch was not a tyrant, not a monster, not a god. She was simply tired. Tired of being what others demanded. Tired of being used as a tool. She wanted peace, and she had found it with Samuel. That night, the horizon sent an urgent message. Grace read it aloud in a low voice. Captain Ross, report your findings. Transmit any data related to the matriarch's location. Command awaits your update. The crew gathered in the small living room. The matriarch sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. Daniel stared at the message on the screen. His chest tightened. He could obey and bring ruin to this valley. Or he could defy orders and protect a secret that the galaxy would never stop chasing. Lucas finally spoke. If we send anything, they'll come. This place will be gone within days, Grace added. If we lie, they'll know something is wrong. Command doesn't trust anyone. Daniel looked at the matriarch. What happens if I refuse to answer them? She met his gaze. Then you choose your own path. And that is all any of us can do. The next morning, the crew gathered by the shuttle. They needed time to think, but time was already slipping away. Lucas argued for hiding the signal. Grace argued for finding a way to mislead command. Daniel said little. He walked to the edge of the valley and looked at the rising suns. He wondered what kind of man he wanted to be. He wondered if he had the strength to disobey. As he stood there, the air above the valley trembled. A distant hum grew louder. Grace's eyes widened as she checked her handheld scanner. "Incoming ships," she whispered. "Multiple. Not from command. Mercenaries." The ground shook as dark shapes broke through the clouds. Armed vessels circled the valley like vultures. Their engines burned bright and their weapons glowed. Daniel felt his heart sink. It was happening already. The matriarch stepped outside, her silver skin shining in the new light. She looked at the ships with calm eyes. Samuel stood beside her, steady but afraid. Daniel, Grace, and Lucas reached for their weapons, though they knew they were outmatched. The lead ship opened a channel. A harsh voice crackled through. "Matriarch, you will come with us. Do not resist. The galaxy has no place for you here." The matriarch raised her hand. The valley grew still. The ships hesitated as if something unseen pressed against them. The hum of engines faltered. The weapons dimmed. For a moment, the mercenaries froze, caught between greed and fear. Daniel whispered to himself, she could destroy them. But she did not. She lowered her hand and spoke in a voice that carried across the sky. "Leave, this is not your place." One ship wavered, then another. Systems failed, weapons flickered, and engines sputtered. Panic spread through the fleet. One by one, the mercenaries turned their ships and fled, leaving the valley untouched. The silence after they left was heavy, broken only by the sound of the river. The matriarch turned back to Daniel. "You see? Power does not need to crush. Sometimes it only needs to remind." Daniel stood frozen, his heart racing. He had seen fleets fight for months without gaining ground. She had ended a battle without bloodshed. And yet, she chose to live in peace with a single human, far from thrones and empires. That night, the crew sat again at Samuel's table. The fire burned low and shadows stretched across the walls. Daniel spoke at last. "I cannot tell command the truth. If I do, they will come. And when they come, they will not stop." He looked at Grace and Lucas. "But if we hide this, we will live with that choice forever." Grace nodded slowly. "Some truths are better kept safe." Lucas sighed. "And some secrets are worth carrying." The matriarch poured them tea. She looked at each of them with her amber eyes. "You must decide. The galaxy will never stop searching. But sometimes the right choice is not to lead them to the answer." The night stretched long. Outside, the river whispered, the mountains stood silent, and the valley held its breath. Inside, 3 humans wrestled with duty, loyalty, and the fragile peace of a world that held more meaning than all the wars they had ever known. The valley was quiet again after the mercenary ships fled, but the quiet did not feel the same. Captain Daniel Ross stood outside the house and looked at the mountains. He felt a weight in his chest that did not lift, even with the calm. The matriarch had shown her power, but she had also shown her restraint. He knew most people in the galaxy would never understand why she did not destroy her enemies. They would see it as weakness. They would come again, stronger, and they would not stop until they had her. Inside the house, Samuel and the matriarch prepared a meal as if nothing had happened. Grace Miller watched them with quiet eyes. She was restless, her mind racing. She could not forget the way the mercenary ships had shut down, as if the universe itself had turned against them. She had spent her life trusting numbers and systems. What she had seen could not be explained by numbers alone. She wanted to ask the matriarch how she had done it, but fear and respect held her tongue. Lucas Grant sat by the window with his tool case, repairing a broken scanner. His hands moved carefully, but his thoughts were heavy. He had seen wars. He had seen weapons that split moons and fleets that burned worlds. Nothing had made him feel as small as the calm way the matriarch lifted her hand. She had not shouted, had not fought, had not struggled. She had simply willed it, and everything changed. He could not decide if that was comforting or terrifying. Daniel came inside at last. He removed his jacket and set it on the chair. He looked at Samuel and the matriarch and spoke with a tired voice. "Others will come. What we saw today will spread. Rumors travel faster than light. We cannot hold this secret forever." Samuel nodded. He placed a loaf of bread on the table. "That is true. But you can choose what you carry back. You can choose how much fuel you give to the fire." The matriarch turned her amber eyes toward Daniel. "What will you choose, Captain?" Daniel did not answer right away. He sat down and rubbed his face with his hands. "I don't know. My orders are clear, but my orders don't tell me how to live with myself. If I tell command, they will come here with fleets. If I say nothing, they will send someone else eventually. Either way, you are in danger." The matriarch placed her hands on the table. "Danger is always near. But I will not live as a prisoner to fear. I chose this valley. I chose Samuel. I chose peace. That choice is stronger than fear." Grace leaned forward, her voice quiet but steady. "If you stay here, you risk everything. If you leave with us, maybe you could find safety somewhere else." The matriarch smiled gently. "Safety is not a place, Lieutenant. Safety is knowing who you are even when the world tries to tell you otherwise." The words sank into Grace like stones into water. She looked down at her hands, unsure how to answer. The night grew long. After the meal, they sat together in the living room. The fire glowed softly and the shadows danced on the walls. Lucas fixed a lamp with a bent wire, while Grace read through old maps on her datapad. Samuel carved a small wooden figure with his knife, his hands steady. The matriarch watched them all, her eyes full of quiet patience. At last, Daniel broke the silence. "I want to understand. Why him? Out of all the people you could have chosen, why Samuel?" Samuel looked up, surprised. The matriarch did not answer right away. She reached for Samuel's hand and held it gently. "Because he did not see me as a symbol. He did not see me as power or legend. He saw me as a person. When I was tired, he offered me water. When I was hungry, he gave me bread. When I wanted silence, he sat with me without words. In him I found what I had forgotten, that I could simply exist." Daniel stared into the fire. He thought of all the leaders he had served. None of them had chosen peace when they had power. They had chosen control, wealth, fear. He wondered what it meant that the most powerful being he had ever met wanted none of those things. The following day, Daniel took Grace and Lucas aside. They stood near the river, the sound of water masking their voices. Daniel spoke low. "We need to decide what we do. Command is waiting. If we ignore them, they will suspect. If we lie, they will test us. If we tell the truth, this place will be gone." Grace crossed her arms. "We can't betray them. We can't hand her over like some prize. That would be wrong." Lucas added, "But if we say nothing, they'll send others. And next time, it might not be mercenaries. It might be a fleet. We need to do more than just hide." Daniel looked at the river. "Then what? What choice do we really have?" They argued quietly for hours, but no answer came. Every path led to danger. Every choice carried a cost. That evening, the matriarch spoke again. "You are troubled. I can see it in your eyes. Let me show you something." She led them beyond the valley, up a winding path into the mountains. The climb was hard, but she moved with graceful ease. Samuel walked beside her, carrying a small lantern. The crew followed, their breaths heavy in the thin air. At the peak, the valley spread out below them, bathed in moonlight. The stars stretched endless above. The matriarch raised her hand, and the air shimmered. For a moment, Daniel felt the weight of countless voices, memories, and lives. He saw battles fought, worlds healed, children laughing, and leaders weeping. It was as if she carried the whole galaxy inside her. Then the vision faded, leaving only the quiet night. Grace gasped softly. "What was that?" The matriarch lowered her hand. "That is what they seek. The memory of all things, the song of every voice. It is not power to rule. It is power to remember. That is why they want me. And that is why I will not go." Daniel's voice was rough. "How do you live with that weight?" She looked at Samuel. "Because I do not carry it alone." They descended the mountain in silence, each lost in thought. When they reached the house, the fire was still glowing. Samuel set the lantern down and looked at them with calm eyes. "You've seen now. You know why she cannot return. You know why she stays here. The question is not what she will do. The question is what you will do. Daniel lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed the vision, the fleet of mercenaries, the calm of the valley, the matriarch's words. He thought of command waiting for his report. He thought of what would happen if he told them the truth. He thought of what would happen if he lied. He thought of who he was and who he wanted to be. The stars moved slowly across the sky. The river whispered in the darkness. And in his heart, Daniel knew that the hardest part was yet to come. The valley slept under the stars, but Daniel Ross did not. He sat outside the house with the cool night air against his face and the sound of the river steady in his ears. The others slept, though he knew their rest was uneasy. Grace shifted often in her blanket, and Lucas muttered in half-formed dreams. Samuel and the matriarch slept close together inside, their breathing calm and even. Daniel envied that peace, but he could not find it for himself. His mind carried too much weight. His orders, his choices, the future, they all pressed on him like heavy armor he could not remove. He rose when the first light touched the sky and walked to the ridge above the valley. The sunrise painted the mountains in gold and silver. For a moment, the beauty was almost enough to quiet his thoughts. Almost. Grace joined him, carrying a small mug of tea. She handed it to him without a word and sat beside him. After a while, she spoke softly. We did what no one else could. We found her. But maybe finding her was never the point. Maybe the point was deciding what to do after. Daniel took a sip, the warmth steadying his hands. You think we should stay silent? Grace nodded. I think silence might be the only way to protect her. And him. And this place. Later, when the suns were higher, Lucas brought news from the horizon. He had scanned the channels and confirmed what they all feared. Command had spread the word that Captain Ross and his crew were missing. Ships were already searching. Some said the horizon had gone rogue. Some said they had been destroyed. Lies and half-truths were spreading, and soon the hunt would grow. Lucas set his tool case down with a heavy sigh. If we go back now, they'll arrest us before we step off the ramp. Inside the house, Samuel listened quietly while he polished his tools. The matriarch was tending the garden, her silver skin catching the sunlight like soft metal. When she returned, she set her basket down and looked at them. So the moment has come. You must decide your path. You cannot stay here forever, but you can choose how you leave. Daniel stood and faced her. What if we lead them here by accident? What if they trace us? The matriarch smiled gently. Then you must become shadows. You must erase what points to this place. You must let the galaxy think you failed, as so many others did. The plan took shape slowly. Grace began wiping the scans and deleting the logs. Lucas adjusted the ship's systems to remove all traces of the signal they had followed. Daniel composed a false report, one that said they had chased rumors and found nothing. It was a dangerous lie, but it was the only way to keep the secret safe. That evening, they shared one last meal in the small house. Samuel baked bread, and the matriarch prepared a stew of vegetables from the garden. They ate in silence at first, knowing this might be their last time together. Then Samuel broke the silence. The galaxy may never know the truth, but you will. Carry it well. Carry it with honor. Grace swallowed hard. We will, I promise, Lucas nodded. We won't let them find you. Daniel raised his cup. To peace, even if the galaxy doesn't understand it. The matriarch touched her cup to his. To choice. For without it, there is no peace. The next morning, the crew prepared to leave. The shuttle hummed as Lucas checked the engines one last time. Grace loaded the few supplies they had borrowed. Daniel stood by the door of the house, looking at Samuel and the matriarch. He wanted to say something meaningful, something strong enough to carry the weight of this moment, but no word seemed right. Samuel placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't need to say anything, Captain. You've done enough by choosing. The matriarch stepped forward. Her amber eyes met his. Remember, Daniel, power is not in what you hold, but in what you let go. Carry that truth with you. He nodded, his throat tight, and turned toward the shuttle. The horizon lifted from the valley with a soft roar. From the viewport, they saw the house grow smaller, then vanish under the cover of trees and mountains. The river sparkled like a silver thread. Then the valley was gone from sight, though never from memory. Once back on the horizon, Grace activated the false report. The message pulsed through space. Sector clear. No trace of target. Mission failed. Returning to base. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she closed the channel. Lucas began wiping the systems, erasing every hidden marker, every trace of their journey. He worked carefully, knowing one mistake could reveal everything. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled. It's done. We're ghosts now. Daniel sat in the command chair and looked at the stars ahead. For the first time, he felt the weight of freedom. It was heavy, but it was his. Set a course away from this sector. We'll drift for a while, make it look like we're lost. The horizon slipped into hyperspace, leaving the valley behind. But the memory stayed with them. The crew carried it in their hearts, each in their own way. Grace found herself thinking often of the Matriarch's words about safety and identity. She had spent her life proving herself through precision and discipline. Now she wondered if safety was not about control, but about trust. She carried that thought with her as she worked the sensors, finding comfort in silence where once she had only trusted numbers. Lucas carried the image of Samuel carving small wooden figures. He thought of the simple bond between a man and a woman who had chosen each other above all else. He had always seen machines as his companions. Now he wondered if he could find that kind of connection with another person. The thought made him hopeful and afraid at the same time. Daniel carried the heaviest burden of all. He had defied command. He had broken the oath he had sworn. But he had done it for something greater than orders. He had done it for peace. He knew the road ahead would be hard. Command would hunt him, brand him a traitor, perhaps even destroy him if they could. But he also knew he had chosen the right path. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Days turned into weeks. The horizon drifted across empty sectors, staying hidden, leaving no trace. The crew spoke less of command and more of what they had seen. They became quieter, more thoughtful, as if the valley had changed not only their mission but their very souls. One night, Daniel stood at the viewport and looked at the endless stars. Grace joined him, her arms folded. "Do you ever think we'll see them again?" she asked. Daniel thought for a long moment before answering. "Maybe not. Maybe that's the point. Some things aren't meant to be found twice." Grace nodded, though her eyes were wet. "But we'll always know." "Yes," Daniel said softly. "We'll always know." Far away in the valley, hidden from maps and memory, the Matriarch and Samuel lived on. They walked the fields, tended the garden, and watched the river flow. They laughed and worked and shared quiet evenings by the fire. They lived not as legend and myth, but as two souls who had chosen peace in a galaxy that did not understand it. And though fleets would continue to search the stars, and though countless voices would whisper of the Matriarch's power, no one would ever find her again, for she had not vanished. She had simply chosen to rest with a human, in a valley that belonged only to them. The galaxy would search forever, but the truth would remain hidden, safe in the hearts of those who had seen it and chosen to protect it. And in the quiet of the stars, the horizon carried that secret like a flame, small but unyielding, a light against the endless dark. The next day in the valley began with a heavy stillness. The river still flowed and the birds still called, but the air felt charged as if the world itself was waiting. Captain Daniel Ross walked along the edge of the water, his boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. His thoughts were restless. He had dreamed of battles and orders, but also of bread, tea, and the quiet touch of peace. The two worlds pulled at him, and he did not know which one he belonged to anymore. Inside the house, Samuel prepared tools for the garden, while the Matriarch tied new plants to their supports. Grace Miller sat at the table, reviewing the scans she had taken. She tried to make sense of the data, but it told her very little. The valley seemed ordinary, the soil natural, the air breathable. Yet something beyond the numbers made this place hidden and safe. She felt both comforted and unsettled by it. Lucas Grant worked quietly on the shuttle, checking its systems again and again. He knew they might need to leave quickly. He oiled the moving parts and tightened loose wires, all the while speaking to the craft in his calm, low voice. The shuttle hummed in response, almost as if it understood his care. Daniel returned to the house and sat across from the Matriarch. He studied her for a long time before speaking. "You know the galaxy will not stop. You know command will not give up. You could run with us. We could hide you somewhere else, somewhere harder to reach." The Matriarch smiled softly. "I do not run, Captain. I have chosen my place. If I leave, then fear has chosen for me. I will not give it that victory. Samuel placed a basket of fruit on the table and added, and if she leaves, this valley will lose its heart. This place is part of her, just as she is part of it. Daniel rubbed his forehead. You are asking us to defy everything we were trained to do. You are asking us to turn away from our orders. The matriarch lifted her amber gaze to meet his. I am not asking you to betray anything. I'm asking you to choose who you are when no one is watching. That is harder than following orders. The words sat heavy in the room. Grace looked down. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, and Daniel felt the knot in his chest tighten. He wanted to believe her, but belief alone could not protect them when more ships came. That afternoon, the Horizon sent another message. This one was more urgent. Captain Ross, transmit immediate status. Failure to comply will result in retrieval protocols. The message pulsed across the screen with authority. Daniel closed his eyes and breathed slowly. He knew what retrieval protocols meant. They would send a stronger force. They would take control of the Horizon itself if needed. They would strip away any chance of keeping this secret. Grace read the words aloud with a trembling voice. Lucas cursed under his breath. The matriarch sat calmly as if the message was a ripple in a pond that would fade. Samuel stood beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. Daniel looked at them and knew the decision was close. That night, as the sun set, Daniel walked alone up the ridge above the valley. The air grew colder as he climbed and the stars began to show. He thought of his crew. He thought of Samuel. He thought of the matriarch's calm voice. He thought of Command's sharp words. He knew that whichever path he chose, there would be no going back. Grace joined him after a while. She carried a small lantern and stood beside him. I know what you're thinking, she said quietly. I know you feel trapped. But maybe this is not a trap. Maybe this is a chance to be more than what they trained us to be. Daniel gave a short laugh, but there was no joy in it. More or less. If I disobey, I lose everything I've built. If I obey, I lose myself. Grace placed her hand on his arm. Sometimes losing yourself is worse. They stood in silence, watching the stars. Then they returned to the house. The following morning brought thunder without rain. The sky shuddered as new ships broke atmosphere. This time they were not mercenaries. These were sleek, disciplined craft bearing the marks of command. Daniel's stomach turned cold. They had not waited for his report. They had come for him, for the matriarch, for control. The ships descended over the valley with precision. Soldiers in dark armor poured out, forming lines at the edge of the fields. Their weapons gleamed in the morning light. A commander stepped forward, his voice amplified by a comm unit. Captain Ross, you are relieved of duty. Stand aside. By order of command, the entity known as the Matriarch will be taken into custody. Daniel stood frozen. His crew looked at him, waiting. Grace's face was pale. Lucas's fists were clenched. Samuel and the Matriarch stood together, unafraid. The air was thick with tension. Daniel stepped forward, his voice loud and clear. This valley is under my protection. You will not touch them. The commander's visor tilted toward him. You defy command? Daniel swallowed hard. I do. The soldiers raised their weapons. Grace and Lucas stepped beside Daniel, drawing their own. The valley seemed to hold its breath. The matriarch lifted her hand. The air shimmered again, but this time it did not strike the ships. It spread softly across the valley like a blanket of light. The soldiers hesitated. Their weapons shook. One by one, they lowered their arms. The commander fought against it, his voice strained. You cannot stop all of us forever. The matriarch's voice carried gently. I do not need to. You must stop yourselves. You must see that chains only break what they try to hold. The commander staggered back, his armor trembling with the force of her presence. His visor flickered, and for a moment his human eyes showed beneath. They were wide with fear. He gave the signal, and the soldiers retreated slowly to their ships. Engines roared, and then they were gone, leaving the valley untouched again. Daniel fell to his knees, breathing hard. Grace knelt beside him, and Lucas stood watch, his hands still shaking. Samuel helped Daniel to his feet. You made your choice, Samuel said softly. Daniel looked at the matriarch. What now? They will come again. They will not stop. The matriarch nodded. Yes, but now you know the truth. Now you have seen that power does not need to destroy to be strong. You must decide how to carry that truth. That night the crew sat by the fire again. The matriarch poured tea. Samuel carved another figure, and the room was filled with the sound of quiet breathing. Daniel spoke at last. We can't go back. Not the way we came. If we return, we'll be prisoners. If we stay, we'll be hunted. But if we erase the trail, if we make them think we found nothing, maybe we can protect this place. Grace nodded. We can wipe the scans. We can burn the logs. We can make it look like another dead end. Lucas added, and we can take the horizon far away so no one follows here. The matriarch smiled gently. Then you choose not only for yourselves, but for many who will come after. You choose to protect peace. Daniel looked around the room at his crew, at Samuel, at the matriarch. He felt tired, but he also felt clear. He knew the road ahead would be hard, but he also knew that sometimes the hardest choice was the right one. Outside, the river whispered again. The valley settled back into its quiet rhythm. The stars above burned with their patient light, and in the small house a secret stronger than any fleet was guarded by those who had chosen it.